breathing deeply because there are two sevens who I know well in the room, and they're sitting beside one another. And they know that I don't allow that, so they pointed it out to me just as I was about to start. About 20 years ago, I heard the great spiritual disciplines master Richard Foster say this: the new tools of the enemy, whoever you consider that to be in whatever context you need that to be in, the new tools of the enemy are muchness and manyness and noise and crowds and hurry. And then about 5 years ago, I heard the great modern poet David White say this: the cliche for stress and overwork is to increase speed. And after a while, you cannot recognize anything or anyone who is not traveling at the same velocity that you are. He continued, you become a stranger to the slower, longer cycles of existence. Now, I'm going to come full circle to that by the time I finish talking about motivations, which is what we're going to do now. As you know, I'm married to a 9, and he struggles with all the things that 9s struggle with. But here's one of his best gifts. He's a ponderer. I really don't think that's the right word, but I'm going to use it anyway. He is one who ponders. And you know, we're losing those people. We're losing people who ponder things, who think them through for a long time before they act on them or before they make decisions. And we're losing a lot in losing that. When we move too fast, when we don't think and when we don't feel and when we don't have an action plan, we make decisions that are based on things that motivate us in our personalities. And they're seldom good decisions. Frankly, in those times, your personality is using you rather than the other way around. And so I want to talk a little bit about the difference in personality and essence. And I addressed it a little bit in one of the earlier sessions. We're about to have this grandbaby that we're thrilled about. She's going to be born with no personality. And we're going to start giving it to her right away. Every time we say shh when she's crying. Every time we, as she gets older, tell her that she talks too much or she doesn't talk enough or she's too friendly or she's not friendly enough. All of those corrections are what caused all of us to add personality on top of personality on top of personality. This journey is about getting back to your essence. Your job's not to create something new. Your job is to allow all of this personality to fall away so that you can get back to who you were in your essence as God created you to be. And it's not one of those accomplishing kinds of journeys. There's been a lot of news around me lately because a marathon that's held in this city was canceled, and people have trained for it for a very long time, and the weather was so bad they couldn't have it. And what happens in that canceling of something that you've trained for a very long time, particularly when it's something like a marathon, is you begin to be motivated by the wrong thing. So people got angry, and people in their own cities across the country had their own marathons, and people had their own responses to all of that. But nobody was able to allow that one just to fall away and then go for the next one. We don't allow things that we prepare for to fall away. And we're over-prepared for all the things that have to do with our personalities. Now, it would only be fair for me to say that clearly I have not trained for a marathon. And if I had, I'd probably be all whipped up and running my own marathon as well. So I don't want to discount that. When we're too busy, we get so far away from our essence that our motives that are even sometimes foreign to us. So sometimes when Joe will say to me, why did you do that? The answer is, I'm not sure I know. What was behind that? What was the purpose of that? I don't know. Now that's when you know your personality is driving you in every way. that you didn't think it through, that you didn't prepare, that you're not there. And so we talked about that earlier, you know. It's default mode. So you're going to have to examine your motives because they determine your behavior. And if you just examine your behavior, not much is going to change. You'll have to get to why you do what you do if you're going to be more free. When everything's too loud and when we're too rushed and when we're too busy, we just go to default mode. And in our culture, intentionality is really rare. You know, it's very interesting to me. We have all these little grandkids, and when they all get together, you know, they're parented by 3 different sets of parents, and it is really like badly run daycare. The rules are not the same for each kid, and all of my children are commenting on one another's parenting styles. It's fascinating, really. And one of the things that I'm aware of is I, from time to time, hear myself or Joe or one of my children say to the little ones, "Did you intend to do that?" And they always lie and say no. I want you to start asking yourself that question. Did you intend to do that? I want you to look at yourself at noon and at 6 o'clock and at bedtime and look over all the things that you just did and said and all the ways that you behaved. And I want you to just say to yourself, did you intend to do that? And that's how you're going to figure out how much you're in charge and how much your personality is in charge. Because we react rather than decide. And the reason for that is we just don't take the time to discern things anymore. We just are too busy moving to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And if we want to live our days in a better way with more honorable motives perhaps, then we're going to have to begin looking at the predictable, habitual, patterned motives that are connected to our Enneagram numbers. But before we do that, I want to explore a couple of reasons why we don't take the time to examine and then question our motivation. And reason one is probably that very few of us have ever spent any time examining why we do the things we do. You don't have to answer, but do you? Do you ask yourself that question? Rather, we rationalize and justify our actions when things don't turn out well. Or we pat ourselves on the back and celebrate when things do turn out well. And then we just keep moving. And reason number 2 is we keep moving because if we don't, we're not sure that we would know who we are if we stopped. David White also said, to be constantly describing yourself and to think that you know who you are, to be constantly explaining to others who you are is a gospel of despair. So let's think about essence, who you were when you arrived on the planet, before you did anything wrong, and interestingly enough, before you did anything right. To be yourself and put that self in conversation with others, and to overhear yourself saying things you didn't know you knew, that's more like your real identity. That's more like the truth. And when you're saying predictable things that you've said before, when you're using all the same answers that you always use, that's usually default. And so that's personality and not essence, and that's a good thing for you to start to work with. Another way I could tell you to sort of watch for that difference, and this is going to kind of make you mad at me once you start the practice. Anytime you're offended, it's not your essence. Because your essence is unoffendable. So whatever's getting you all whipped up, that's all personality. No essence in that. So let me give you an example. This is kind of hard for me to talk about. A big motivator for me as a 2 is that I want and need to be wanted. Now, I'm also adopted, you know, so that makes that bigger. Now, take this end. I have a husband and 4 children and 2 son-in-laws and 6 grandchildren who want me. And they want me a lot, and they want me like I am. And they not only want me, but they let me know in so many ways that they want me. My children have all been a part of this project because they want me and they love me. Now follow this because it's important. If I don't adjust my motivation to something that's new and something that's more relevant in those relationships, then several things happen. And the first is this: I miss what I have. And the second is they don't know how to move ahead in relationship with me because I'm still back here saying, want me, want me, want me. And they're saying, I do. Let's do the next thing. And third, they don't understand why I can't accept that they want me. So do you see? I got to have a new motivation sometimes. And when you're experiencing transformation, you have new motivations. Now you get to keep the old one, but if you're not adding any new ones, you're losing. So a new motivation for me would be to honor their love for me and to honor that they want me. The first, probably 5 years that we were married, Joe would put his hands on my face probably 3 or 4 times a week and say, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. You know, after 26 years, he shouldn't have to say that anymore. And if he does, that's on me. Do you see that? So as we go into these motivations, I want you to watch for that template in you. Because this work is really important relationally. Maybe the most important of any of the things that we're going to talk about. All right, ones. Enneagram ones have a special place in my heart. My dad was one of my heroes, and he was a 1. And you know, I've talked to you about my second oldest grandchild, and he's a 1. He's very dear to me. One of my best friends and one of the biggest supporters of my work is a 1, and she always has my back. And I love these people. I know them, and I love them. But ones don't believe they're good, and they don't believe they're worthy, so they desperately try to be correct. And that means it's not okay to make any mistakes. Because remember, they're always seeking perfection in thought and in word and in deed. So some of their motivations are that they need to look at. 1, ones, you're always about improving yourself and improving things by getting things right. So you're motivated for everything to be right. Second, you're motivated to try to avoid making mistakes. You feel a strong need for self-worth and for comfort and for knowing where you belong, and you're motivated to know your place in things. And to that end, you like to keep everything the same. You like for things to stay congruent. So that's a big motivation for you, because if things change, you don't know your place anymore. Then you got to find it again, and then they change, and then you have to find it again. One set very high standards for themselves and for other people. And they're motivated to be the very best they can be with integrity at what they do. So ones, I got to tell you, it's really important for you to remember that the voices that you hear, that critic that you hear all the time, that critic is not your friend. And that critic, those voices will keep you trapped in the same motivation for all of your life. You have to do some work around that. And the only way I know you can do it is to answer back and say that is not true. One of our volunteers here at the center, and one of the people who helps keep all things going for us, is a former psychiatric nurse. And she named her voice as Nurse Ratchet. And she says, I've just stopped listening to her. And that's the attitude you've got to have. Because if you don't, you're never going to get out of this cycle. So take that list of motivations that I gave you and do a lot of work with them. I can't do it for you. And figure out what some new motivations would be once you get past these. And don't give yourself permission to stay in these over. Surely by now, good grief, if you're my age, surely you've learned that you can't make everything perfect. It's time to move on from that. So pick out what's really important to be perfect, and then have your new motivation be That's the only place where you're going to desire perfection, that you're going to let imperfection go in all the other places. That's a good example for you. Okay, 2s, we got this really problematic need to be needed. And we got some challenging work ahead of us because we're intent on having other people need us. And, we got this thing going of denying that we have any needs. But I'm going to tell you something. I got a bunch of them. I have a bunch of needs. And one of my needs is for time alone. And I had no idea. And one of my needs is to know myself when I'm not with anybody else. And I had no idea. And so if I just stay trapped in the same old motivations and need you to need me and need you to need me, I'm going to stay trapped in the same pattern of meeting all your needs and just resenting you beyond what you could imagine for doing what I've asked you to do, which is need me. One of our strongest motivations is to avoid ever being seen as needy. You know what happens if you don't practice the hard stuff? Then when you get there, you're not a very good, kind, loving, generous human being because you just haven't practiced. And there are times when I'm needy and I just act awful because I'm mad at myself. It's time to get past that. It's time for a new motivation. I don't know where and how you learned that you shouldn't have any needs, but I know you learned it. And in that sense, in that reality, we are motivated to hear and believe that we're wanted, but we don't hear it and we don't believe it, so we settle for appreciation. Okay, well then if you could just appreciate me. And then when somebody says, oh, I just so appreciate you, it makes me kind of mad. It's like, is that all? Well, that's all I'm motivated to get is appreciation because I've given up on love and being wanted because it's like you can't want me enough or love me enough. That's all on me. That's all work for me to do. We're strongly motivated to feel necessary and important in the lives of other people. And we want to feel connected and approved of. And we're motivated to create the image, whatever it is, that's needed for us to receive all of those accolades that we're looking for. Rejection and abandonment are extremely painful for 2s. So 2s are motivated to avoid any behavior that might cause others to disassociate from us or to leave us. And then when they do disassociate from us and leave us, we fret and worry and spend hours trying to figure out why. 2s try to create a place in your life for them by being helpful. And sometimes that desire to be helpful turns into a desire to be irreplaceable. And that's just not healthy. All right, 3s. It's really tough to be a 3 in the United States. We've already talked about that a little bit. Because the motivations that are offered to us by our culture, offered to all of us, are the motivations that 3s have been responding positively to since childhood. So first of all, you're motivated by a strong desire to be and appear to be successful. You want to be winners and leaders, and you enjoy recognition for both. One motivation that's ever present in your mind is to avoid failure. And that's problematic because failure and suffering are the only things that teach you anything. One of the things that my friend Richard Rohr says is this: success after the age of 35 has nothing to teach you. Now think about that. Failure has everything to teach you. 3s are also motivated to get to the top and then stay on the top. Now that takes a lot of energy to get there and then stay there. And so they try to get positive attention, and they want to be admired, and they want to be impressive to other people. And then when they learn this language, they just tell you that they want to be admired and be impressive. Just like I tell you that I want to be needed and loved. And just like ones tell you they're just trying to get it right. They're just trying to do it perfectly for you. We always say it's for you, you see. When threes do achieve these things by addressing these motivations, then they come to believe that they are loved for what they do and not for who they are. And their great desire is to be loved for who they are and not for what they do. But with that single motivation, they perpetuate over and over and over the cycle of being loved for what they do. And remember, threes are sometimes called chameleons. And that's because they can be the poster child for every group that they belong to. My goodness, if you can do that, wouldn't you be proud of yourself at the end of the day? You could end your days with, I've been what everybody wanted me to be. If you never asked the question, was I what I wanted to be? So that has to be a motivating question for you. You've got to be motivated to be who you want to be for you, not who you want to be for everybody else. And that whole thing comes with the motivation to be whatever you or the organization desires, and you're really good at that, so it's a big trap. All right, fours. I'm going to begin with one of your strongest motivations, and it's this. And fours have shared it with me so many times, in so many cities, and in so many ways. And that's the desire to be seen and understood for who they are. That is it for them. But you know what? Think about what I said in my opening comments. David White. To be constantly explaining to others who you are is a gospel of despair. So fours, when you're constantly trying to get other people to see you and understand and know you for who you are, you're in despair. That's not a good space. Four territory is this: you're very complex. And there aren't very many of you, so you don't see yourself coming and going. You go a long time without running into another four, most likely. And your third motivation, and it's really hurtful to the whole of your life, and that's to avoid ordinariness. And I don't mean this to sound glib or like I'm being a smart aleck, but you need to clean out your garage. Because until you learn that there is great beauty in ordinariness, you're never going to stop seeking, never being ordinary. Now, you can't just, Brother Lawrence wrote a book, and in that book, I can't think of the name of it right now, but in that book, there's all this, the practice of the presence of now, or this moment, the practice of living in the moment, something like that. And what happens in that book is, Brother Lawrence is cooking a lot. Well, I'm going to tell you something. I've raised 4 kids and cooked for a family for years. And I can't do that practice cooking. So the book's lovely, but if you can't take it beyond cooking, fours, it's not going to help you much. You're going to have to take it into what needs to be ordinarily beautiful in your life. And I don't know what that is, but you do. Maybe you need to go grocery shopping every Tuesday morning, not at a Whole Foods or a fine grocery store, but just at an ordinary one. I don't know. But I know that if you want to be authentic, and if you want to be seen for who you are, you're going to have to kind of do all the ordinary things that authentic people are busy doing. Driving their kids to school and raking leaves, cleaning out the refrigerator. All those things that just don't feel very textured and warm and wonderful and artistic and creative and deep. Avoiding ordinariness is going to hurt you, so I want you to give up that motivation. Relationships are everything for you at the end of the day, and you're highly motivated to make connections with people. Those connections for you have to be emotionally meaningful connections. And sometimes making a connection with somebody that's not going to last past the moment is very life-giving. And I know that because, I talk to everybody. And sometimes I just connect with people and I never see them again, and it's just a wonderful moment. And you know what happens when that happens? It's essence to essence. There is no personality. It's just it happens to be a millisecond when I'm in essence and a millisecond when they are. And it's a connection, and it's lovely, and you can take it home. But you can't manufacture it to have it again. You got to let that be and then keep moving. And you want to be, as a 4, very expressive in different areas of your life. And many of you are, in literal art forms, poets, dancers, musicians, painters, etc. But you want that because you're motivated to change your environment. You want the environment that you live in to be more beautiful and more textured and more meaningful. And you know, I think there's a reason for the seasons. All the leaves are gone off the trees, and there's a reason for that. And I worry about people who live in places that they don't experience the change of the seasons, where they don't understand the value of things being ugly and then being beautiful again, being ordinary and then being special again, because that teaches a lot. But of all the motivations that you have, I believe they're all trumped at the end of the day by this one motivation, and we all need to share it with you. And that's the motivation that 4s have, to be authentic and to be real. And don't forget, your personality is not an authentic, real expression of who you are. Your essence is. So that's a motivation that we could all share that would change how we relate to one another day in and day out. And that's one place where 4s can lead us. They can teach us to look for that. All right, 5s. I can only imagine the challenge you're facing every day with this limited amount of energy. So the first motivation, of course, that we want to discuss is that you're highly motivated to get home before the energy runs out. And then, because you're the most detached of all the numbers, and because you value privacy and alone time, you're motivated to live your life so that you never have to depend on somebody else to take care of you. I'm going to tell you, until you learn what you learn by having other people take care of you, you haven't learned what you need to know. There is a humility in receiving that is necessary for wholeness. And to set your life up so that you never experience that is to set your life up for a great loss. And you know who hurts the most? The people who love you, who want to take care of you. So put my 2-ness together with my mother's 5-ness. I adored her. And she was so sick. And I was literally hanging on the bars of her bed with my chin over the top, crying and saying, "Could you please need me for something?" And she said, "I've always needed you." And I said, "Not for anything that we can measure." 5s, don't take that away from the rest of us. Because if you don't let us meet your needs, we can't be who we are either. And you can apply that to every number and every exchange between numbers. If we're going to do this relationship thing, we got to get out of the rut. Because you remember, Dr. Vanier said at SMU in 1969, the only difference between a rut and a grave is depth. Since you're in the fear triad, you got a lot of anxiety going on, and I know that. And you have to manage it, and I know that. And I know that you want to manage it with knowing and understanding and being self-sufficient. And that's a big motivator for you, but a complementary motivation to that would be that you don't ever want to look foolish. You don't ever want to look like you don't have the right answer. I taught at Bishop Lynch High School here in Dallas for a long, long time. I taught senior theology. And one day after school had literally just let out. You know, it was in those years when I was kind of full of myself, thought I knew everything about social justice, and I was going to change the world pretty much by myself, and, you know, all those embarrassing things that we hate to revisit. And I walked out of school one day, and I fell in a manhole. Now, it's right when school let out. So what I want you to picture is I'm in a manhole with both arms in, so I can't lift myself out, and my head is literally ground level. So I look like a bowling ball sitting on the ground. Now, in that moment, I thought, does God really have this much to teach me? Am I so far gone that something this big is required for me to learn what I need to learn? And people who I taught with just walked right by me. I mean, they would just look at me like, you got a problem there, don't you? And there I am, head level on the ground, looking at everybody's shoes. And finally, 3 or 4 enormous football players walk up to me and say, you know, we've always liked you, and because we do, we're going to get you out of this manhole. And then Monday morning, we're going to tell you what we want in return. And I'm telling you, I looked right up as far as I could and said, I'll give you anything. Now, I don't know if you can even imagine how much I learned from looking that foolish to high school kids. You know, they're not the most gracious bunch on the planet. But I'll never forget it. I'll never forget that. Because I was helpless and I was in a jam I couldn't get myself out of. And those boys showed up to me on Monday morning and said, don't you get it? If you hadn't already given us what we want from you, we would have left you in the manhole. So 5s, along with 6s and 7s, you're highly motivated for safety and security. And you measure many things. What information you have to give, what information you're going to hold, how much everything's going to cost you, how much money it'll cost you, how much privacy, how much energy, how much affection, how much time. And you're motivated to protect all of that. And it all comes at a big, big cost. 6s, you're scanning the horizon for danger, and by golly, it's everywhere. And you're watching for people with hidden agendas, and there are a bunch of them. And that leads to the first 2 motivations. And the first is, you are so motivated to believe you're safe in a culture that's never going to give you that. Never going to happen. And secondly, you're motivated to have a plan and a backup plan for anything and for everything. So worst case scenario planning is your answer. And all I want you to do is the spiritual practice in the next few days of thinking about some of the worst case scenario plans that you've had. And I would just like for you to know for yourself whether or not you implemented any of them. And the second thing is, I want you to think about the things that have happened that really kind of messed up everything for you. And ask yourself if you had planned on that, and if you saw it coming, and if you knew how to get yourself out of it. 6s want security, and they want predictability, and they want certainty, and they don't trust themselves. So they're motivated to find friends and partners and spouses and authority figures that they can trust, so they can go to those people to get help to make all of the decisions for their lives. And in that, there are some good things. They're very loyal because they want you to be loyal to them. And they have an overriding concern for the common good. All these 6s do. And they always want to understand their role and their part. So they're highly motivated to know exactly what's expected of them. And the only way they know how to figure that out is by asking lots and lots and lots of questions. And the motivation is to get them answered. This explains to you why they kind of bug you with all of that. And like most of us, 6s want to be understood, and they want to be included, and they want to be liked. And they want to belong, and they're highly motivated to know their place. 7s, you're as unique as 4s are in some ways. And you are certainly motivated to seek security and safety. And yet, you appear to be adventuresome and unafraid and free of limits and boundaries. You're also motivated to protect your freedom, especially your freedom for spontaneity. And you like to explore all the possibilities, and you want to have fun, and you think life ought to be fun, and I agree, but it can't be fun all the time. And while all of that's going on, and that's a lot, While all of that's going on, you're highly motivated to believe that you can be in a relationship where you will be taken care of. But you know, you're going to have to risk asking for that. And you're going to have to risk waiting for it. And you're going to have to risk allowing it instead of jumping in too soon because you believe it's not going to happen. 7s are people who really want to contribute to the world. They want to make it a better place, genuinely. They want to make it a better place. And they're motivated to find support for their ideas. They're motivated to find people they can depend on who are going to come through to help them make the world a better place. And they want to believe that you're going to come through, but it's very tricky for them for a couple of reasons. And the first is they really hold on to disappointments. Now, you know, they don't feel them, but they hold them. Do you understand? The whole teaching is that they don't have awareness of a full range of emotions. They want to stay with a half range of emotions. But when something happens over here, they hold on to it for a long, long, long time. And secondly, 7s have a very hard time forgiving themselves when they failed to come through for other people. And they hold on to that. And when you're holding on to disappointments in other people, and when you're holding on to disappointments in yourself, you can't trust that other people are going to come through for you. So you have to be able to let go of that. And with a 5th motivation, you try to manage all of this. And that 5th motivation is to keep a high level of excitement about all things. Now, I want you to know, everybody, that people love you for your personality, not for your essence. And when you start to do some work on yourself, when you start to try to be less of this and have some new motivations, if you're a 7, people are going to come up to you and say, "Good grief, what happened to you? You used to be so much fun." If you're a 2 and you say, "You know, I'm not going to bring cookies. That's just not mine to do," they're going to say, "Really? Because we sure thought we could count on you." People love you for your personality. And nobody's ever going to walk up to you unless they've done this work with you and say, "You know, I'd really like for the essence in me to get to know the essence in you." What they're going to say is, "You know, I don't like this change that's going on in you. I liked you the old way better." I've over the years even gotten letters from spouses, usually husbands, who say, "Stop messing with my wife. I liked things the way they were before." So be prepared for that. All right, 8s. You're the most misunderstood number on the Enneagram, and you're spending your life with at least one motivation that remains constant, and that is to hear and believe that you're not going to be betrayed. Since you were a child, you've tried to not be vulnerable and to stay very leery of people because you're afraid that they're going to betray you. But with all of that, you'd like to be understood at the same time. Control is central for you, and I want you to remember that the goal is not because you want to control other people, but you just don't want them to be in control of you. And you got to get to a point where you recognize that you just can't be in charge at everything. And you're going to have to learn to not be motivated all the time to avoid betrayal by being in control, so that you can let other people teach you how they lead and how they see and what they have to bring to the table and how that might help other people. You're also very highly motivated to be self-reliant. You want to assert yourself, and you want to prove yourself, and you want control over space and people who are likely to influence your lives. I've known quite a few 8s intimately. Joey, and you know I love her deeply. And there's a genuine tenderness, kindness in 8s. And it's deep, and most people don't get a chance to see it. And I would say that's because 8s, you are highly motivated to be invulnerable. And that's just not a good motivation. It's not good for you, and it's not good for the rest of us, because vulnerability is coming. Joe and I have a friend who lives on the Texas coast, and they have a home they share with us on Ponderer Island, and we love him and his family very much. And he has cancer, and he's 80 years old, and he's very sick. And they called and asked us to come visit, and we did, and Joe spent some time with him working on some spiritual stuff, and then their family kind of wanted to get together with us. They've done a lot of Enneagram work, and we got together with them to visit. And we were all kind of saying to him in this family gathering, and in that moment and in that way, we're kind of part of the family. You got to fight this. We don't want to lose you. We're not ready. We don't want you to die. And he started crying. And then the family started talking about the fact that he's been kind of hard to be with, kind of a curmudgeon lately, kind of gripey. And he knew that, and he said, Suzanne, why do you think I'm doing that? And I said, because you have no practice at being vulnerable, so you're being a jerk. Now, H, you need to take this in, because you're going to be vulnerable someday, and you can do that with grace, or you can do that and be really annoying. So I go through this whole thing with him about talking about vulnerability. And he said, well, tell me what that looks like. What does vulnerability look like? He was crying, and I said, that's what it looks like. You're vulnerable because something's happening that you can't manage, and you've been able to manage everything for most of your life. So I do my best work. And I think, we've really made some progress here. And he lives next door to his son, and we were at the son's house, and Joe and Bob start to walk back home. And Bob's on his walker going down the driveway. And Joe reported to me later that Bob turned to him and said, now, what is vulnerability again? And what in the world is she talking about? Nines. Your number one motivation is, I think, the number one motivation for all of us. And that is that you want harmony and peace. And while you don't believe your presence matters and you really don't think you should assert yourself, you're still kind of motivated to hear and believe that your presence matters. You kind of want us to tell you that you matter to us. And I know that you really hate conflict. And I know that avoiding conflict is a strong motivator for you, second only to wanting harmony and peace, probably. But you got to remember, I've said all along, if I could be any number on the Enneagram, I would want to be your number. And I think it's because you seem to be able to maintain peace through all sorts of things. But I've learned that what looks like peace is really just a desire to be unaffected by life. And you're good at it. And so it's not that you have peace. It's that you've just decided not to be affected by the fact that you don't have peace. Or that you don't have peace with me or with the rest of the world. And I think there are two sides to all of this, of course. And one of the things I want you to look at and talk in terms of talking about the Enneagram being the best part of you and also the worst part of you is that while you see two sides to everything, you don't see two sides to being unaffected by life. That's the one place where you have a blind spot that's really hurting you. And I love about you that your strongest motivation after those two is to bring people together. I love that about you. But you know what? If you're going to bring us together, you're going to have to stay with us. And you're going to have to be part of what being together means. You don't get to bring people together and stay outside the circle so that you're not affected by what happens once we all come together. Because that pseudo-peace or pseudo-harmony, it's not the real thing. And the real thing is kind of messy, really. Peace is messy. And harmony is messy. You got to work out a lot of details to get to that. Now, there are a lot more unique and personal motivations that each one of you have that are unique to you. I've just offered you a few to start working with so you can get started. But let me tell you what I know. As we all live our days, we need to be about the business of growing and changing. And while some motivations may stay the same through life, you should have some new ones. And you shouldn't wait until retirement to have some new motivations. You shouldn't wait till the second half of life. If you're young, you shouldn't wait till you finish school. You shouldn't wait till you get married and start a family. You shouldn't wait till you get your first job. New motivation should be coming all the time as we grow and change. And when it isn't happening, then we're dying. And so to come full circle, because of the tools of the enemy, noise and crowds and hurry and muchness and manyness, and because of the cliche for stress and overwork to increase speed, we're all just exhausted. And so I want to close with a wonderful story about David White and David Steindl-Rast. And if you don't know their work, please get to know it. David White is a poet who was working in California as a member of a staff in a social service agency. And if you've never worked in a social service agency, then you may not know that the work is never, ever, 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 ever done. And what happens in staff rooms, at least it's what happened in the rooms that I was in when I was doing social work, is we kind of all get together and exchange the goods that we have to help whoever we're trying to help. A lot goes on in those rooms. And David White walked to the door facing of the room where all the staff was getting coffee and exchanging needs with one another and said, "Has anybody seen David?" And everybody at the exact same time realized that he was the only David that worked there. And somebody kind of jokingly said, "Maybe you need some rest." And he thought, "Oh my gosh, I can't find myself." So he went and told his supervisor that he thought he needed to take a few days off. And he went home. And when he got home, there was a bottle of wine sitting on the table, and he remembered that Brother David Steindl-Rast was coming to have dinner with him. And so when David Steindl-Rast got there and they were visiting with one another, and David White told him about his day, and he said, "I'm just exhausted, and I'm going to have to take a leave of absence. I'm empty. I can't do anymore. I'm just going to really have to take a break because I'm just exhausted." And Brother David Steindl-Rast said this, "Well, David, the antidote for exhaustion is not rest. The antidote for exhaustion is wholeheartedness. And what you need to look at is what you might be wholehearted about again." And what I want to tell you is these motivations that we give ourselves to over and over and over and over are exhausting. And we need to name for ourselves and for the people around us new motivations that have to come with the things that we are wholehearted about. And I want so much for you. I want so much for all of us. But I don't think I want anything more than I want your life to be you pursuing something that you are wholeheartedly committed to. And so I hope you'll work toward figuring out what that is. And I hope you'll find a friend to talk with about that. And some things that I could help you with are these. Avoid habitual, predictable motivations. Name your personality and then allow some of it to fall away. And journey back toward your essence. Or I don't know, maybe it's forward to your essence, but journey toward it wherever it is. And live with wholehearted enthusiasm and love. A young woman who's heard me teach on her college campus for 4 years came up to me recently and said, I've been listening to you talk about your husband and your children now since I was a freshman in college. Do you think you'll ever calm down a little bit about them? And I put my hands on her face and I said, oh, sweetheart, I hope not. Thank y'all very much.
As a one, my biggest motivator is to do things well, to do things right, to do it, to improve the things that I'm involved in. And while that's wonderful in a lot of ways, it's also a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. It also engages me in doing things that don't really matter because I'm still seeking that nth degree of making something better that really maybe I'm only the one that will notice. So there's two sides to this coin of this motivator in terms of making things well, making things good, doing the best that I possibly can.
Twos really want to be wanted. They a lot of times don't feel like they're loved unless they are wanted by people, and so we work really hard, and I work really hard at trying to do things for people and meet their needs, etc., so that they'll want me around. It goes a little beyond that because I not only want to be wanted, but I want to be the one that they want more than anybody else. If I'm there and somebody could be there in my place, it wouldn't matter, then it doesn't feel nearly as good as if, oh my gosh, you have to be there for us. That's what I love to hear. So most of what I do because I want people to want me. Even people that don't matter, I still worry about, will they run into somebody and say, oh, Libby wasn't that good, or no, we really don't want her anymore, we can't use her anymore. And they might say that to somebody else, and then all of a sudden the whole world will know that I'm not wanted, which is a lot of times the way I feel. So it's pretty frustrating, but I am definitely motivated by getting people to want me to be around.
A number of years ago, I had just completed my second master's degree, and I called a friend of mine and said that I wanted to go to England and do my PhD, and he's a very wise friend, and he said to me, yeah, why don't you do that, because then everyone will really love you then. And I remember thinking that he'd really outed me, that I had so connected my value and my worth as a human being with accomplishment and with being a success, and more importantly, being perceived as someone who was a success, a standout, somebody that really believed in an odd way that love and respect were elusive, and that the only way I would ever earn love and respect is if I achieved at the highest level, which is an exhausting way to live your life. Proof positive of that is I only found out that I was going to speak about this about 15 minutes ago, and I spent the last 15 minutes on my laptop looking for the perfect quotes that I could say when I got on camera to prove my own worth and value. So the journey for me is really to learn not to confuse love and admiration.
As a 4, ever since I can remember, my motivation for all that I did or wanted to be was just a search for significance, and it wasn't a popularity. It wasn't a need for success within whatever I was doing. It was just more of a need to be unique amongst the groups of people that I have worked with or my relationships. And then the challenge became trying to become successful in whatever it is I was called to do, but within that, being unique and not just following what the culture or whatever my professional requirement was for success. And so with that, the challenge has always been staying in the present, focusing on how I see myself within my relationships to other people, in avoiding the pitfall of the four, which is to kind of live in a fantasy world, to live in a world of just my mental creation of how I see myself versus how I'm really seen. And then ultimately the goal is to just be who I am and accept how people see that and how people receive that, to be able to settle into my true significance with whoever I'm with and whatever I'm doing.
For me as a 5, I find that my motivation day to day, a lot of it is around how am I going to get through my day. So I really have to think through. I start my day full, and as I interact with people throughout the day, I find my energy goes down, and I really need some alone time to build that energy back up. And so what motivates me, I guess, is planning and being really mindful about my day professionally and personally, and thinking through what are those things that are going to drain me, those emotional things that can be very intimidating for me and really bring my energy down. And so while I love knowledge and learning new things, I really am motivated also not only by that, but also by really, I think, planning and getting through the day emotionally.
My biggest motivation is fear. And on the good side, I'm usually the most prepared person in the room. I'm the one with the aspirin, the extra water, the power bar in the bag, or the full tank of gas. So I'm always prepared. Also, when I find myself in situations that I fear, like talking into a camera about myself, I realize I have to do it to overcome it, and I feel that it makes me grow and accomplish more than what most people do.
As a 7, what motivates my behavior is the next fun thing, the next place to go, the next event that's coming up. There's a song that is out that says more, more, more. Well, that is the 7's theme song. Another thing about 7s is being trapped in pain. I heard Suzanne talk about that for a long time. I didn't understand that. But that really correlates with the more, because the more I do, the less I have to feel my emotions and stay caught in pain or unpleasant places or non-fun places. My friends to this day have a joke about me taking my own car everywhere we go, so if I need an escape route, I have one. So that is really this 7's motivation.
I'm an 8, and I'm motivated by doing. I have the need to be efficient. I have the need to complete and be done. If somebody is working on something and I don't think they're able to do it, I will step in and take over. And it's not that I mean to be overly aggressive, it just takes everything I have to step back and let that person do whatever it is that they need to do. And if someone needs help, I will step in and take the reins and complete whatever it is. I don't think I quite understand what they mean by help, as maybe being side by side instead of taking kind of a leadership role and finishing it and completing whatever it is that's been set out to be done.
As a 9, one of my biggest motivators for my behavior is the desire to be unaffected by life. And for the longest time, I didn't really understand exactly what that means. Life happens and we're in it.